Hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about that time I played as an octopus in the game of Rogue Octopus Escapes. And if you're thinking, wait just a minute, Squirrel, didn't you just do a review last time we were here? Yes, I did. And then another one almost right before that one too. And you know what? I'm going to have another one after this on a solo TTRPG game because somebody reached out and wanted it reviewed before their Kickstarter ended. And if you don't like it, well, let me know down in the comments because I never know what to make. Anyway, part one is going to be about the author and how I came across this little game, as well as a look at the book itself and the setting. Part two will be a look at the mechanics, and then part three will be my experience playing it and final thoughts. So grab your trunks and let's go for a swim. Alright, so here we are under the deep blue sea. Who made this thing? Where the heck did he come from? What's going on? Well, can't answer that last one, but I can at least tell you who made the thing. His name is Nick, which I appreciate. I like names I can pronounce. And our connection was Blaze from World Shapers. As a matter of fact, if you look right here on the credits, you'll even see Blaze, or as he's properly known, Jan Lukin, right here in the playtesters. Not sure how they got connected, but Blaze asked me one day after a game of World Shapers if I would like to check out the Octopus game. And I think it was around the time of scheduling this that a lot of things started shifting around behind the scenes because if I'm not mistaken, we were supposed to originally play this on Avenue Studios as a Scratterday, but Avenue Studios had just started dialing back on a lot of things, plus they were going to be booked for a couple months straight with some promotion they were running. So unfortunately, Nick kind of got lost in the ocean for a little while, but we eventually made things work. All that to say, my interaction with him was limited, but he was more than willing to run us a game, despite all of our scheduling difficulties that followed because there were so many different time zones involved. My point is, he seemed to be a kind soul and was very happy to run us a game, and my personal takeaway was that he genuinely enjoyed it and had a good time and wasn't just putting on a presentation face. Now, what about the book itself? For starters, there is no physical book. It's strictly PDF, and that's probably because it's only about 30 pages altogether, and that's if you combine both the player's book and the GM's book, which come in separate files. Now here's where I'm going to pick on Nick just a little bit. The GM's handbook is 562 megabytes, and the player's handbook is 690 megabytes. And if you're thinking, holy pozzoli, Batman, that's a big PDF. Remember, each of those files are only about 15 pages, so what the heck happened? Well, I assumed something didn't get compressed with the texturing and patterns he used, but I thought I'd call in the residential expert and see what she had to say. She said the same thing. Naturally, when we finally got together to play the game, I had to ask what in the world happened, and he honestly didn't know, but his guess was the textures and patterns as well. The good news is, though, he does include a simple text version of each, which is really handy, as well as some fillable character sheets and some printer-friendly items. So he's got you taken care of. Although, as of recording this, the GM Guide simple text is listed twice, but the one in the parentheses is actually a fillable GM sheet. So be on the lookout for that. Other than that, though, whether you use the plain text PDF or the fancy one with the file size issue, they're both a very easy and very quick read. Now, as for the setting, there's actually a roll table for some options, and of course, you can always come up with your own. The goal, however, does remain the same. You all play as octopuses trying to escape whatever conditions it is the GM has you under. So, if you're experimental weaponized octopuses made by the military, or just regular 8-legged Joes floating around in the restaurant aquarium waiting to be eaten, the goal is still to escape. The challenges you face along the way are what will change, as well as some of the tools at your disposal. And that was interesting to me because I think this might be the first TTRPG I've played that gave you such a clear-cut goal each time you play, while still being able to shake things up a good bit. Alright, so what are the mechanics like? What type of dice does this thing use? Not D20s, not D12s, and nope, not D10s either. If you think about it, it's probably not surprising that the game uses D8s. Because, octopus, 8 legs. Anytime you want to do something, you roll a d8 and either add or subtract your stat modifier depending on which way it leans, and that's it. You can fail a task, you can pass with a complication, or you can roll a complete success. And while these are considered the general values, they are ultimately up to the GM and will fluctuate depending on the task you're attempting to do. Lucky for you, liking and subscribing is a guaranteed success. So let's have a look at making a character so we can see the type of things we might be able to do. And I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order from what the book says because I want to start with the mostly flavor-based stuff and ease into the choices that have more direct mechanical impact. The mostly flavor options would be personality and color or pattern. These are mostly just to help you define your character and make them stand out amongst the others in the party. You also need to decide what your goal is. Why do you want to escape? Where are you going? Do you even want to escape? Moving along and getting only a little bit mechanical, we have species. There is no list to choose from, and it's up to you to look at real-world octopuses and pick something. Depending on what you pick, you might find yourself gaining some extra abilities based off real-world octopus facts, or you can just make something up. Then we have the size of your octopus, which can range from tiny to apocalyptically large, or at least with the GM's permission anyway. There is a fun note, though, that says the larger you are, the more secure the GM will need to make your housing, meaning escape might become more difficult. And that brings us to the stats, which, of course, there are 8. Hugging, your ability to wrap tentacles around things and hold on to it. This can also be used for lifting and strength-based things. Suction, how well your suction cups work. Can you stick to and crawl right up a glass wall? Do your suction cups work so well that you can suction right to the air and float? Fun fact, there's some seriously good construction adhesive called F26 that people say can glue glass to air, and boy howdy, let me tell you, that is almost true. I once glued a guy's locker shut with that stuff. They had to cut it open and everything, man. It was great. Friggin' hated that guy. Manipulating objects. This would be using items you find, such as tools or even weapons. Camouflage, which is pretty self-explanatory, except there's this fun fact here that says studies have shown octopuses can communicate with others by changing the patterns on their body, so this can double as a method of silent communication between the players. Contortion, squeezing your body through small places and around obstacles. Movement, mostly speed-related things, but is modified depending on your environment. If you're in water, you roll twice and pick the highest. If you're out of water, you roll twice and pick the lowest. Sense, which is vision, hearing, instincts, and that kind of thing. Ink, your ability to shoot ink. Only thing is, every time you shoot, you change this value by -1. In other words, the more you ink, the harder it gets to do. Next comes the stat distribution, which I thought was pretty interesting. All of these skills start at 0, and your total amount of points has to add up to 4, which at first sounds simple enough and not very exciting, right? The twist is you can go below 0. So let's say I dump 4 whole points into contortion. I'm capped out, right? That's the it for me. But if I decide I'm not interested in camouflage at all, I could actually drop that a couple points and put it at -2. 4 and -2 only comes out to 2 total, so I now have 2 more points to put somewhere else, such as sense. And I think that's pretty cool. 4 is the highest a stat can go, and -4 is the lowest a stat can go, and 4 has to be the overall total. Super simple, but putting that negative value on something makes you stop and think, even if you originally thought you wouldn't be using it. Once you consider that negative value, you start thinking, now wait a minute, I might use that ability. Another fun twist is that each player gets a unique ability or object that you come up with. I think mine had an old book that was basically Van Helsing's journal, but he couldn't even read it. Glee's character had a jewelry box that she could squeeze into if things got bad, or use the mirror in it to stare at herself because that's the type of character she made. So was the last character now that I think about it. Starting to see a pattern. So really, that's about all it's got going on. It's a very light system. But as for the big question of did I like it? Yes, I did, and I would play it again. And part of me wants to say that a lot of that came from the GM and the group we had playing, but isn't that any TTRPG once you think about it? The group is what makes or breaks it at the end of the day, right? Y'all know I love poking fun at 5e, but in reality, if I'm at a table with the right people, we're probably still gonna have a good time. I mean, if the table had the right people, we wouldn't be playing 5e to begin with, but you know what I'm trying to say. Rogue Octopus Escapes was a fun experience. The rules-light nature allows plenty of flexibility and silliness, and the difficulty being in the GM's hand to adjust on the fly keeps things interesting and encourages trying to think outside of the box. At first, I thought the goal always being to escape would kind of limit your experiences, but after experiencing it myself and looking over the other possible settings, I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that one simple goal. In the game we played, we picked Lovecraftian horror as the setting, and it was a circus that we were trying to escape. We broke the aquariums that we were in, then I think at one point I stabbed a guy with a piece of glass, then got on a horse and ran away. Somebody else ended up making a deal with Cthulhu and brought him into the world, and if I'm not mistaken, they started the apocalypse while I lurked at the bottom of the ocean learning to read. Just an overall good time, and Nick did a fantastic job of running it. Lots of improv on his part and quick decisions that all made a great experience. You can watch the game if you want, and I'll have the link in the description. It was me, Glee, Zaxania, Blaze, Dave, and Jacob, so it was a full house, and why we had so much trouble getting the schedules to line up because we had such wildly different time zones. And like I said, Nick handled it like an absolute pro. He started us out in our own tanks in groups of 2, which made it easy for him to go around the table and get to everyone. But even after we eventually broke free and all the chaos ensued, I still feel like we all got even amounts of play. I couldn't have handled that many players, so hats off to him. Now, if any of this sounds like a good time to you, you can head on over to DriveThruRPG, and as always, I'll have a link in the description. The game is a whole whopping pay what you want, so yes, that does mean you can nab it for free. That said, as always, if you end up giving it a shot and enjoy it, make sure you head back to DriveThru and throw them a few bucks. And if it's something you want to keep in your library and plan to use more than once, consider throwing him more than just a few bucks. It might seem like a silly, simple little game, but I assure you it takes work just like anything else. Now, I'm kind of getting used to the idea of using this thing as it seems like a good way to end videos, so I'll say this one also gets the Squirrel stamp of approval. Yeah.